Our next speaker is Dave Brandt. I'm on the program with him mainly for one reason and one reason only. We want you to get as many credits as you can, but I'm turning it over to Dave. Apparently, there's a rule that you got to have somebody, I guess, with the training, but Dave's our trainer today. So he's going to talk about the no-till and the cover crops. So everybody knows Dave Brandt, been farming for a number of years, probably one of our best examples in Ohio. So, Dave, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be back to Ada again and learning more about how we can do a better job with what we're trying to do. And I thought I'd start the first picture with our farm so you could understand where we're from. And I like to say we're in the oasis of our area, because if you look around us, it's all brown, you know, and you'll see green in us. So if you ever come to visit and you see a green field when you're coming to visit us, that's what we're farming, you know. And this is a drone picture. My grandson got a drone, and he's telling me how bad we've been farming the last 20 years by using this drone. So we're having fun learning how to do things. And I think, you know, what really started us off was looking at doing more diverse with covers instead of using single species. We started in the 90s, 1994, 95, by doing dual species, which was peas and radish precisionally planted. And I still do this on new farms that we take over, because it gives us a chance to break through that compacted layer with the radish in a row, you know. And what we're seeing here is that we can keep our cover costs down by precisionally planting these with plates with air seeders. We can place each radish seed about 4.5 to 4 inches apart. The winter peas are about 2 inches apart, and our cover crop cost us about $11 an acre. You know, as we go to blends, and which I really like to talk about, and they fall in after we do this, to get our program started with our cover crops and to reduce nutrients. The next slide will be our blended cover crops, and why I really like this picture because of the butterfly, and shows we can bring beneficial insects in with us. And as we bring our beneficial insects in with our cover crops, we can start and reduce our fungicides and insecticides and those kind of things that harm our insect population. With a blended cover crop that some of the blends flower, we can bring as many as 1,000 to 3,000 beneficial insects in during a growing season. And as we do that, we can reduce that fungicide that we need. We also see another thing that happens with the sunflower in our area, and I have a lot of elderly landlords. And if without the sunflower, our neighbors that do conventional tillage call this a weedy mess in July and August. But with the sunflower, it's blooming. We can take some off and give to the landlords, and they think you can do no wrong when you give an 86-year-old landlady a bouquet of flowers every Monday morning, you know. And that helps keep the rent a little cheaper also, you know. Just some economic things, you know, in CTC did a survey in 2014, and this just shows that if we use no-till and cover crops, there is a increase in yield, and there's a little more return on investment, you know. Of course, we're all talking to the crowd here, the crowd here, and we know that because we're all no-tilling, you know, and doing cover crops that are very successful in our operations. As we look at cover crop blends, we like to have a fair amount of legumes. This would be after a wheat planting in July, and this would be the spring just before we plant corn. So as you can see, the white flower happens to be Bercine clover or Balanza clover. There's winter pea, there's hairy vetch, there's crimson clover, and there's rye. And we're trying to build our blends to have enough nitrogen-fixing plants with enough carbon plants so we don't do too much to screw up our carbon to nitrogen ratio in our blends. when we have a blend that looks like this, we can normally count on about 100 to 115 pounds of nitrogen being pulled down from the atmosphere, putting in the root zone that we can utilize later on during the season in our corn crop. This was some information we put together from our farm. We did this back in the 90s when we was really looking at single species covers to see how well we could collect nitrogen from these plants. Because when I talked to some university people, they said all we had to do was bury the top, the nitrogen was in the top. At that point, we didn't want to do the tillage. So we set up plots and we planted all these single species, used a combine to tell us how much nitrogen each one of these species replaced when we hit the maximum corn yield by reducing the nitrogen. And if you look there, we have cool season legumes and warm season legumes. And the bottom two, the sun hemp and the cowpea, will be the warm season legume that we like to use during the summertime. And the ones above there, the winter pea, the cahaba vetch, the hairy vetch, the crimson clover, and the red clover would be a more cool season legume. So when we're doing our blends in the summertime, we look at warm season legumes and cool seasons because my weatherman in Fairfield County does not know whether the sun's going to shine or whether it's going to rain or going to be hot or cold. You know. So what I try to do is fool Mother Nature. So I'll put some warm things out there and some cool things. So in 18, our warm things didn't do very well because we never got very warm weather. Our cool things did a lot better. In 17, our warm things did real well, and I'll show you some pictures later on to show you this as we go through. But if we would pick sun hemp and cowpeas and winter peas and hairy vetch and crimson clover and put those in the blends after our cereal crop, or maybe after early harvested soybeans or early harvested corn where we have maybe another 2.5 or 3 week growth window, try to get that to a 4 to 5 week growth window so these will grow well. We can accumulate up to about 400 units in the soil. You know, just imagine what that'll do to your nitrogen cost and for your corn crop in the next year. You know, again, this is our blends, and I really like to show you how well they look. As we do these blends, we get lots of diversity. We're trying to mimic Mother Nature. If you've ever seen a wood lot, all the trees are not oak or all the trees are not maple. There's several different species. There's several different sizes. There's also some undergrowth in some of the wood lots. And so we're trying to mimic Mother Nature, and that's why we do that. And you see these different heights of plants here, you know. Again, we'll go back to our precision planted peas and radishes, and these are doing a lot of things in our soils as far as lifting the soil with the radish. The radish will fumigate the soil as it freezes in January and February. It tends to fumigate the soil. It takes out the nematode for soybeans and does a lot of other things and stores nutrients in its root zone. As the radish grows, it actually does tillage. So we actually have, when we have them in a 30-inch row, we actually have a 30-inch strip till machine because it lifts the soil about 2.5 or 3 inches. And we don't have to use diesel fuel or iron to do that, you know. Most of the tubers will probably be from 12 to 18 inches deep, and then the taproot will be another 18 to 24 inches deeper than that, you know, which makes it really nice as a product to pull nutrients to the surface for our next year's crop. As we look, I went too far, I think, yeah. As we look at nutrients from our crop, and this was done by Dr. Lafiq Islam on our farm for 5 years. This is a study he had performed for us, and as you can see, we have enough nutrients there to grow a pretty good corn crop. We're looking at about 100 and 250 pounds of nitrogen in the soil surface, phosphorus about 23 pounds potash about 230, sulfur and calcium, and some magnesium, And this is all done. We pull a sample the day we pull in the field with the corn planter and send it to Dr. Lafitte, and then he does the analysis on it, and this is what he come up with an average after 5 years. This was done by Dr. Ray Wilds out of Maryland, and the reason I like radishes in a row is because of this that you can see. Dr. Wilds says in the center of the radish we can accumulate up to 140 pounds of phosphorus. And if we miss that row with the corn and go 1.5 inches or 2 inches away, or as much as 2 inches deeper, you can see there's still phosphorus in the area. In other words, this tuber does a lot of work to bring nutrients to the surface. And this is organic phosphorus that's readily available to any plant we put there that wants to grow, I really like to talk about a 3-year rotation. I think with a 3-year rotation, it could be any kind of small grain. And I would surely highly think to consider that in some of your operation if you could, because it just gives us a chance to go in there late July, 1st of August, plant a diverse cover crop that tends to grow 4 to 6 foot tall, which means we actually have 4 to 6 foot of root in the soil till it hits something that it can't grow through, and gives us an opportunity to do a lot better than we can do with a corn bean rotation, because in a corn bean rotation we have about 3.5 or 4 weeks of growth, and the plants are only 8 or 10 inches tall, And there's an idea that cover crops are catching on, so if you can grow some of your own rye or some of your own triticale, and if you're a livestock producer, it's a great place to utilize early spring growth of that as taking part of that off as pasture or haylage or something like that to make more feed if you need it, And the benefit of doing that is that we can grow a big cover like you see here, and that represents 12 ton of hay, and a lot of this will bring nutrients to the surface that really helps us out in what we're trying to accomplish. We talk about how to manage. It's fun to manage cover crops when they grow well, and we have the kind of weather like we had in 17. Everybody had a pretty good time to get things in. The cover crop grew well. We're looking here at a picture that had 22,000 pounds of biomass. We was able to use our crop roller behind the planter. We plant first and normally roll behind. The reason is I can't adjust my planter good enough so the crop roller covers up all my mistakes and the corn grows real well, But you can see how much biomass we have here in 17. And, if we think about 18, it was cold all winter till about the first day of May. May the 1st, it was 74 degrees and was hot the rest of May. So guess what, fellas? It's just like having to replant your corn. The cover crops didn't do very well. So you have to learn to adjust and manage for this, In this case, we had to use a herbicide to take it down. It wasn't big enough to roll. We had to use some nutrients because we didn't have enough plant to pull the nutrients up that we wanted to use. So this year we had to use a little starter fertilizer and use some chemical to control what we were trying to do. So to me, it's no different. Cover crops do fail sometimes, and we have to look at that and understand how to manage those situations that we're looking at. But it's a lot simpler to manage a situation like this than one like this, I think, because here you have to understand how much herbicide you want to use and what you're going to use as a burn down, and how much you can actually count that cover crop as a credit for the crop you're trying to grow, Again, this is just a picture of large biomass with our planter frame sitting there, and my grandson came back to work to the farm last summer, so we were planting here, and he said, we went to lunch, and he says, Grandpa, I can't believe how much that cover crop grows over lunchtime. And I said, well, that's the reason we have a red planter, because if we had a green planter, we couldn't find it, But you can see how tall the cover is, and Here we're looking at about 190 to 200 pounds of nitrogen, about 60 pounds of phosphorus, about 200 pounds of potash that these plants have brought to the surface that our new crop that we're planting can utilize. Here was a CRP farm that we was able to rent, and with renting this farm, we went there 2.5 months before the contract was over and got permission to kill what was growing. We used Roundup at a quart per acre. We killed the 10 years of trash that was there. There wasn't anything good there to speak about, plus a few saplings. We put a 10-way cover crop in the 25th of July, and this was May the 10th. We was rolling it. It got big enough in 17 to do this. We planted corn without fertilizer and without chemicals, and we averaged 192 bushel corn per acre. That's a 20-foot crop roller with a 60-horse John Deere tractor, and my wife loves to do that, and you can see that there's no problem. So here is our results. The rye's laying there. We've got a thatch on the ground. In Fairfield County, we lose about 5.5 or 6 ton of soil per acre per year from our conventional farms. When we have this type of cover here, we lose less than 100 pounds of soil per year. Imagine the nutrients that leave in a soil loss of 5 ton per acre. There's a real easy way to figure that. I know if we have to buy topsoil for in Mom's garden plot or around her flower bed, and you buy a ton of it, it costs you $42 a ton to buy topsoil. So I use that figure, and if we're losing 5, that's $200 a year of nutrients we're losing. It's probably not that bad, but if you was replacing, it would be. Another thing we see with our cover crops, we're able to control the temperature. You saw that with Christine Jones' slide from Texas, but here, this day, the ground air temperature was 92 degrees. Our cover crop was 78, and my neighbor's conventional corn was 91. If you look at his conventional corn, it's already had nitrogen on it. It's had 300 pounds of anhydrous knifed in before planting. He's got 300 pounds of starter fertilizer and a 2-inch by band below that corn. But look at these leaves. This ground is so compacted and the roots are so tight, it's still showing nitrogen deficiency, because it can't get to it. He has a lot of loss from the soil. We have compaction here about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch thick from just the soil or the rain beating on the soil. Another thing I think it happens when we have compost like this or cover crop like this, as we get rainfall events that moisten that cover crop and that water leaches down through that cover crop, I think I get release of nutrients every time it rains. Because as we look at the field and we look at these cover crop fields, they turn green again or get darker green immediately after we get a rainfall event. There's a lot of talk about compost tea, and what that is, it's the runoff from a manure pile where they're blending things. And I think we have the same situation here with our cover crops. We're making a compost tea as that moisture goes through that residue and releases the nutrients throughout the year, By fall, that'll be totally gone. Our earthworms will totally annihilate that, and we will not have much cover left in a cornfield in the fall. Again, just another shot of our covers that we plant into. We try to put a lot of nitrogen fixing in because I don't want to buy nitrogen, Most generally, if we have cover crop like this, we apply no nitrogen. I'm comfortable with that. Not everybody is, But I've known over the years that we've tried to inherit it, that I think when it looks like this, I can handle it. If this is your first year out, I wouldn't reduce that much. I would take 50 or 60 pounds out, and I'll bet you won't affect the yield a bit. You know, you may increase the yield. And here we are, just, you know, I told you my son got a drone. So here we're planting in green. But I wanted to just show you how nice the planter looks and how clean the tractor looks. There's not a bunch of dust on it. We found out with this tractor, and grandson's really good with electronics, and I didn't know it did it, but it actually tells us how many gallons of fuel we're burning an hour. So I work for my uncle, and we do some conventional planting with this planter. When we was in his conventional field planting corn, we were burning 13.5 gallons an hour diesel fuel with the tractor pulling that planter. We went to this field in our cover crop, we went to 7.9 gallons an hour. Couldn't believe that planter pulled easier in a cover crop field than it did in a loose field that was tilled. We saw the same thing with our combine. Our combine in a soybean field making 73 bushels an acre, beans in rye was burning 12.5 gallons. Went to my uncle's conventional beans making 31 bushel. We burnt 27 gallons an hour pushing that head. So there's little things that add up to make money, you know, that I think we need to look at. And as we look at doing things with cover crop, we talked about how we can improve the nutrient density of our grains. And I really think we're going to feed the world, fellas and ladies, by nutrient-dense grain. We're not going to feed it by producing 500 bushel corn, you know. Because as we look at up in the yields and look at the things that's going on, you'll see that we're losing protein. So if we look at cover crop fields with no fertilizer, we're pushing 9 to 10% protein. We're pushing 60-pound test weight corn, 58-pound test weight corn. As we look at half-rate fertilizer, we're down to 8.6. Full-rate fertilizer with a cover crop, we was at 7.5. My neighbor's conventional corn was at 5.1. Imagine if you're feeding livestock or milking cows, which one of those corns do you want to buy to feed your livestock, you know? My personal opinion is I think if I can feed my livestock 9% protein corn that has more amino acids in it, they become more healthy, so I need less veterinary bills. I eat that meat, and you can see I'm pretty healthy, you know? I think we can help ourselves by eating high-protein livestock, you know. Some information that Jim wanted me to share with you is some of our input costs. So this is last year's input cost for corn. We got our cover crop cost at $25, which would be a 10-way species. We got our non-GMO seed cost without treatment at $66. We got a little bit of burn down because the cover crop wasn't big enough to use the crop roller this year. We had a little bit of starter fertilizer that had nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash in it. We have our equipment costs. We have our average cash rent of a total of $334 an acre. In October, when we harvested the corn, it was worth $3.11, so it took 107 bushel to pay the operating expenses of that field. We averaged 192 bushel of corn, 0.9, so our net farm income off of that field was $262 an acre. You know, my lady banker is really happy with us this fall, you know. This is a yield map, and my grandson's really good with computers. I mean, if I touch electronics, it goes to pot, but he's got it figured out. So instead of using yield, he says, Grandpa, let's look at return through the yield map, you know. So the green is like 200 to 300 bushel corn or whatever you want to say, and it goes on down from there, you can see. And the little bit of this happens to be a waterway. And this happens to be the corner where the woods is, so the deer and some of the wildlife work on it here. But look at the amount of money we're doing on this farm, return on investment. To me, that was worth more than knowing it made 270 bushel corn, you know. This is my buddy. This is a crabbit beetle, enlarged a good little bit so you could see it really well. You know, they're like our earthworms on our farm. If you come to our farm, we'll give you a shovel, and you can probably find 15 or 20 earthworms in a shovel full, but you can find about 3 or 4 crabbit beetle. We see more and more crabbit beetle because we have gone away from seed corn treatments, soybean treatments, treatments on wheat. Because as the slug that we have, and we have pretty good slug population, as the slugs crawl over that corn and get that seed treatment on them, which is a neonic, and my crabbit beetle bites him, and I should have put the movie in here because I had one, but I didn't want to do it because in 3 seconds this crabbit beetle starts shaking and he turns over on his back and he dies, but the slug crawls away, you know. These things eat slugs. They can eat 10 slugs a day, each beetle. When you have 3 or 4 beetles in a shovelful, guess what? We don't have much slug pressure. What else do they eat? Guess what? They eat giant ragweed seeds. They eat foxtail seeds, you know. So we're getting a lot of benefit out of them, you know. So when you see these kind of critters, and they're hard to see all those pinchers, but, you know, look for those things as you do soil improvement and use cover crops to see what happens, you know. We like to talk about how to do things, you know. A lot of people says, well, we need to plant brown. Well, you can burn your cover crop off. Just remember, the weatherman's got to be right, because if you burn this thing off and it's brown like this and you got that much residue and we have an inch of rainfall and you have no tile, we end up planting wheat in the fall because it never dries out, because it can't get any wind or sunlight down into soil, you know. And too many times we got caught because we sprayed early and it turned brown and then it rained for a week. You know, the weatherman said it was going to be clear for a week, and guess what? It rained every day. So that's the reason that we plant green. Then we always start in April planting soybeans first, because we found beans seem to tolerate the cooler soils. They'll tolerate a lot more things than corn will, you know. So here we're planting soybeans on April 28th in rye that's about a foot tall. And here we have to use a herbicide to burn it down, you know. My wife says, just wait a little bit, Dad, and you'll see how it works better. Well, here it is, 2 weeks later. You know? And guess what? It grows really well. I mean, you know, that's 5 foot tall rye. It's in head. You run over with a planter with duals on with all them press wheels, you hardly need to use a crop roller. It's laying there flat. It'll die. It may take it 2 or 3 weeks. And the problem, I'm impatient, so if it ain't brown in 3 days, I think I got to spray it, you know. But I found out if I just wait, it will die. And it saves some money, you know. Save that first herbicide pass. Maybe you got enough residue there to save the second one. But if you don't have, you can come back and take care of it, you know. You can use a drill or a planter, doesn't matter. I just want to keep showing you how clean our equipment is. Guess how often we have to change filters. How many times we have to change cab filters? Not very often, because we're not in that dust, you know. So our maintenance costs are down is on our equipment. Our hours are down on our equipment, you know. Not like we used to. This is a friend of mine in Indiana. This is Richard Clark's information. I thought this was really interesting, because as we look at the growth of rye, and what this is, he took a 2x2 square, just took a number 9 wire, made a 2x2 square, took it out in the field, throwed it out. When it falls down, he took the clipping of rye out. So the first clipping he took at 12 inches high, sent it off to a lab, found out he had 2,000 pounds of biomass. But look at the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potash he had in that top growth. You know? As we went to 18-inch tall rye, 120 pounds of nitrogen, 44 pounds of phosphorus, and 213 pounds of potash, and 4,000 pounds of biomass. At 28-inch tall rye, look what he's got. You know, 2 weeks ago, I used this to my agronomist. I had my agronomist come, and we were sitting around, and he was saying, you know, it's getting time to put fertilizer on your rye that you're going to harvest, David. And I put this slide up, and I says, Mr. Agronomist, if I got 200 pounds of potash and 44 pounds of phosphorus, what do I need any fertilizer for? You know? And he just kind of pulled it up his book and laughed. I don't know whether I really ticked him off or what, you know. But, you know, think about what we want to do. If it's here, why do we need to buy it? You know? And even look what happened 2 months. It says right there, dead rye sample taken 2 months after termination. This is what was left after he terminated. So it was probably terminated mid-May. So this would have been mid-July, maybe the 1st of August. And now this is going to come available as that corn plant is starting to make grain fill. So what happens to that corn plant or that bean plant? It puts more beans in. Or the corn plant gets heavier, puts more test weight in the grain. Do you know? These are things I think that we need to look at and understand what we're doing. If we're going to use cover crops and we're going to keep the soil where it belongs, let's learn to reduce. You know, let's be proactive on this situation so that we no longer have to worry about Lake Erie suing the farmer. You know, let's show them that we're actually doing the right thing. As we move to this, here comes the beans. What we've seen by doing this, we see that when we get a rainfall event and we have this residue here, that the soil does not move, so it doesn't move up on the stem or on the leaf. So guess what that means? We don't have sudden death. We don't have white mold problems. You know, we don't have stem diseases that come from the bacteria from the soil. A lot of pluses that we can see and look at and get done. The rewards are rye cover crop, you know, and 72 bushel beans. If you really look, and I'm sorry you can't see it, but look at how close the nodes are. You know, I've been in bean fields that's been shoulder high soybeans. You would have swore they would have made 100 bushel to the acre, as tall as they were. The node sets or the pod sets were 8 to 12 inches apart with 2 pods, with 2 beans. Here we're looking at 40-inch beans, maybe 36-inch beans, and the pods are touching each other. Instead of 2 pods, there's 3 to 5 pods. Instead of 2 beans in a pod, there's 3 to 4. There's where the yield comes from, you know. I can tell conventional farmers, I'll give them 5 more bushel of beans if they'll just plant rye. You know, it's been proven time and time again they get more beans by using a rye cover. It eliminates one tillage pass for them. They save $15 or $20. You know, the last 2 guys I helped with, the banker says, thank you for talking these guys into using rye covers because it saved their financial burdens they had. Here's our expenses for 18. Our rye costs $9. We buy non-GMO beans, and that's about a bushel of beans per acre. They're about $42. Guess what? Next year, we got a cleaning facility. My bean cost next year is going to be $8 and whatever the price of beans are at the terminal, you know. We're going to plant our own. Why not? Non-GMO, you know, they'll work. We have no fertilizer and no chemical costs. We have equipment costs there. We have a land rent. We have a total cost of $235 an acre and some change. The break even in October when we harvested it was $8.40, so it took 28 bushel of beans. We averaged 72 bushel. We had $369 an acre profit to pay household effects, buy a new couch for my wife, those kind of things that make everybody happy, you know. Again, a yield map from our soybean fields. Interesting thing on this yield map is this is the home farm. This is 50 years of no-till. This red mark right here we built a cleaning shed right here, so we had to go to the road ditch, which was right here, to get three-phase power. So the power company says you have to have a trench 18 inches wide with two 6-inch PVC pipes, one in case it don't work, and we'll put the wire in the other one. So this was destroyed soil that we put back in, and then this was a farm we bought 3 years ago. We have a long way to go on this farm to make it as productive as this one, you know. But again, this is return per acre, not yield. 2015, we were all GMO. So we put out a GMO plot with 15 varieties of corn. We had 4 non-GMO varieties of corn, and we used 11 organic varieties to see if we should be looking at moving toward organic. You know, what we saw was the 4 varieties of non-GMO corn outproduced the GMO varieties. Guess what? 16, 17, 18 were non-GMO, and we're still yielding, you know. In 18, this was 11 non-GMO varieties, averaged 180, average cost was $259, return per variety was $289. There's the difference in varieties, and we'll show you that here in a minute. Again, this is my grandson's idea to pick on Grandpa. He said, these are our variety plots. You can see some different varieties here. But he always picks out where I had to stop and figure out what was going wrong. Or my 2020 monitor didn't tell me something happened here. Or I didn't let the planter down quick enough here, you know. And I thought I really did a good job till I saw this aerial picture, you know. So I guess these drones are all right to show us some of our mistakes, you know. Interesting thing, this is the yield data from our non-GMO plots. Over here was our cost, and you can see that. This is the maturity days. This is the varieties. This is the dry yield. Grandson was so good, I says, you're so smart, I'll let you set up my electronic planter. When we finished in the fall, we planted 15-inch wheat. We went to corn in the spring. He forgot to change the monitor from 15-inch rows to 30. So our first 3 plots, we only had 16,000 stands. We did dump it up enough here. The balance of the plot was really good. But what I want to show you, even though we had 16,000 plants, we still had a $56.55 return on our investment. If we back figure, which you shouldn't do because you don't know whether the years got longer or whatever, but if we took that to 32,000, this figure would have been $374. You know, but it doesn't matter. You know, we were averaging somewhere. In some varieties, here's a variety that didn't perform very well, and that's what we're trying to learn. We're trying to learn which varieties will make us the most money. Yes, Jim. Well, we got 97-day corns, 100-day corns, 109-day corns, and then 113s. And we were trying to look and see if our early maturing corns would come off drier and still yield pretty well and give us another 2 weeks before to plant cover crop in, you know. And we're trying to show farmers that we can do these kind of things and still make some money with some of these early maturing things, you know. Some things we can do to do some interseedings, and I really think interseedings is going to have a place as long as you understand the residual timeline of your herbicides, you know. You can't be using a residual herbicide that has an 18-month restrictions against clovers and grasses. You know, and you put the clover and the grass in there a week and a half after you plant the corn. You know, it just ain't going to work, guys. So we can do interseedings. We like this real well. It's quite successful. In our case, we just don't have enough time to get everything done. Between me and grandson, we don't have enough time with the seed business to make everything happen. But here you can see it. I don't know whether you can see it or not, but there you can see the seed coming out of the tube. These are fun things to run, especially if you're doing custom work, because you're in corn that's 10 to 12 foot tall, and what you look at is that white post right there, tube going down. You don't see the rest of it, because if you look right or left, you've done run over 500 foot of corn. You know? And I'll tell you what, when you hit a tile hole that's 2 foot in diameter, you can make a U-turn right now. You know? Lots of interesting things coming out. A lot of good interseeders are being built and designed. And I think this is where we can really see the advantages of cover crops in a 2-year rotation, where we get more growth out of them. Maybe realize some of this cover crop to supply some organic N to that corn to finish up to give us better test weight. I don't think it's going to give us anything as far as grain fill goes, but I think it will help enhance the test weight, you know. But these are the kind of results we're looking at. We have to understand what kind of species we're looking at. We have to look at species that will tolerate shade, you know, maybe tolerate some drier type soils. So look at some clovers, maybe annual ryegrass seems to be able to handle the shade pretty well. Low-growing clovers work really well. Don't be putting sorghum, sudan, and millet and that kind of stuff in there, because it just won't do it, you know. Again, here it is. This is happened to be radishes and rye that was going to go to beans, you know. And then this was soybeans that we had put 6 different clovers in. This was 2.5 weeks after harvest, the soybean. I want to show you how much that grew. It actually covered up all the soybean residue that was in the field, you know. And there's rye that will go to beans on our farm. And I really, you know, if we have the kind of weather, if we have some rain after we do our seedings, it works really well. If you do it with an airplane and it don't rain, it's not very successful. But if we have a rain or two afterwards, it works pretty well, you know. And again, I like to look at big, bulky cover crops, big, tall cover crops. And here's what I'm trying to show you. Here's our wood lot. If you'll notice, it's all sizes. If you look at our cover crop, it's all sizes. You know, and this is what we can expect from a 3-year rotation. Or if you happen to have preventive planting. I never could figure out why a conventional farmer wants to go out and work the shit out of the ground all summer long on preventive planting when he could go out there with $15 or $20 worth of cover crop, grow about $150 worth of nutrients, save the soil, increase water infiltration, you know, and have the ability to really loosen that soil and do a good job with it. This is what we see normally in a 2-year rotation. Low-growing cover crops. This is probably a herbicide overlap right here. I know it is because it's our farm. You know, it's probably a skip. But these are the kind of things guys call and say, well, why can't I have this, David? You just don't have the time. This is time. This is not time. But if we do things right and manage right, this is what we can have. We can have our cover crop in one field and have a tremendous crop corn, yield of corn or beans beside it, you know. For small people, they make small crop rollers. You know, if you want a garden, you got a big garden, just use a crop roller. If you're really innovative, this is my poor man's crop roller. I have a patent on this. If you want to see me afterwards, I'll tell you it'll cost you $2, and I'll give you the patent right to build this. You know, this is a 4-foot 2x4 with a 1-inch angle iron bolted to it and 2 rubber bungee cords. That's my son there. I give him a 20-footer, but he only lasted about 6 foot. You know, but you know, does the same thing as a $900 crop roller hooked to a little tractor. You know, so if you have small areas and you want to try some things and learn how to do it, this is one way you can accomplish it. You know, but I have to have a little bit of fun. We always talk about precision planters, and this is one I built. I really have to brag about this one. It has the fluted culver here, has a seed opener and a press wheel. The monitor is a red mark on that rubber tire right there. The weight transfers right here, you know, and that's about 200 pounds. And right there's the seed box, and the bucket's right there in front of him. So he throws 2 pumpkin seeds in there when he sees the red mark. And about 9:30, 10 o'clock, he was complaining, so I give him air conditioning, you know. And at 1 o'clock, it got so dry, we had to change the transfer weight, so we took the 200-pound guy off and put the 400-pound guy on there, and we were off and running, you know. And guess what? There's money in pumpkins, guys. If you got got development, they're good things to have. And here's the results. This is my lovely wife after 53 years. She's still there, you know. Not in the field, but she's at home. But look at these pumpkins, you know. And there sits the gate. And I learned a valuable lesson. The first year I had a pair of bibs, the knees were wore out of it. We sold all kind of pumpkins. So I had some money, you know. They paid in cash. So I bought a new pair of bibs and a new straw hat, and I didn't sell very many the next year. So I went back to the holy bibs and a tore up straw hat, and we sold more pumpkins, you know. So this is how we have fun in agriculture. And I'm telling you guys, if you're not using cover crops and you're not having fun, just grow cover crops, because you have so much time to enjoy life and enjoy things and understand what happens. You need to be in the field and look at what you're doing. You cannot sit in a tractor seat and look at the monitor, or you can't drive 50 miles an hour past the field in the pickup truck and understand what's happening. You need to learn to feel the soil and smell the soil to make it work well. And I thank you for the opportunity to talk.